And we're live. So, what's going on, everybody? This is Aaron Washington back with the BCB podcast. This is our 69th installment. And this time, it's going to be all about Summer League, guys. So, as you know, I went to Summer League, had a nice trip out there for about 4 days. And I had the pleasure of meeting Max while I was out there. He has a podcast of his own. Really cool guys. They do a lot of great work. We have a mutual friend, so we got to connect while we were out there and just have a great time watching some games. So, Max, welcome onto the pod. Great to have you on. Looking forward to really kind of recapping and reintroducing all these great memories that we have from NBA Summer League.
Yeah, for sure. I've been looking forward to this podcast for a while, so I can't wait to get into it. Like, there was a lot of good basketball to watch, which is not always the case at Summer League. I mean,
True.
A few years ago, you had the Mavericks' second best player in the Summer League team was like this dude named Carrick Felix, who we have never seen again anywhere. So,
yeah, I mean, it's hit and miss with Summer League. It's to be expected. You have some guys that are mainly on the fringe of an NBA rotation, so you're not always going to see the best competition. I'm sure you remember that one of the games we were at, we were in the second row, and it was, I can't remember the second team, but I know Washington was one of them, and it was just a slog. There's barely any scoring.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was the Nets, which was surprising because they were one of the good teams, but I'm pretty sure, I feel like Allen was sitting out that game.
Allen didn't play, I remember. I have a picture of him on the sideline in his polo, so that was one of the reasons why it was such a brutal game. But that's to be expected. It's kind of the nature of Summer League, but on the other end of the spectrum, we had a lot of great matchups, a lot of great players that we're actually about to get into now. That's going to be the first segment of our podcast. We both have 5 players that we thought were standouts that did a very great job showing scouts, showing their teammates at Summer League that they're worthy of a roster spot, worthy of regular rotation minutes. So, Max, you're the special guest this week, man. I'm going to let you have the first crack at it and get things rolling with your first player that you thought made a very positive impact on his stock at Summer League just a few weeks ago. Hey, Max, I can't quite hear you, buddy. Do you want to maybe unmute yourself real quick?
Idiot.
There we go.
Anyway,
sweet. All right.
I had my mute on so that way I didn't accidentally make a noise and then have the mic on. But John Conchard, Indiana, Purdue, Fort Wayne, who's now in the Grizzlies with a 2-way contract. He really impressed despite not necessarily having the world's greatest statistical showing. I mean, I'm sure he was relatively efficient, but he didn't put up a whole lot of production. But the biggest thing that stood out to me, and I'm not sure about you because I'm not sure how many Grizzlies games you got to see, but I know with the ones that we saw, he really stood out with some of his deflections that he was able to collect, and then also just overall showing a pretty high level of feel on the court for a guy that's kind of a more fringe level prospect. What do you think?
Yeah, he was definitely solid. I mean, all around that Grizzlies team was excellent. It was one of the reasons why they made it so far in the playoffs here, the Summer League playoffs. That whole roster from top to bottom, the coaching staff has a really good understanding of what their players can do. And him in particular, I mean, across the board, the intangible stand out to me. They don't always have the best raw stats, at least from first glance. But, I mean, overall, you can't be mad with the impact these guys have from just making the right plays to being in the right spots. Overall, Brandon Clark, who we're going to get into here in a minute, has, of course, the best profile. He's the most talented player, but, across the board, they have fantastic prospects. So, I mean, I was very impressed as well.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at his stats, it's like, oh, he shoots 23% from the field, but like he only took like 13 shots, so that's not representative of how good of an offensive player he actually is. And then on top of that, he's like, as a guard, he's like 6'5", pulls down 8 boards a game, playing like bench minutes. That takes effort. That takes effort, and it's really remarkable to see like a player putting like their heart out onto the court, and just feels like every time when you see Conchar on there, that's what he's going to do. He's going to play within the team. He's not selfish. So I'm not sure what more you can ask for from a 2-way contract. And also feels like he fits perfectly into the Grizzlies team culture that's forming now, and will actually reformed really. It's still the same culture, just with new players. And it's remarkable they've been able to do that so quickly.
Absolutely. I mean, the Grizzlies have something great going. They have Ja Morant on board. Jaren Jackson didn't even play, of course. He's way too good for this. But you introduce Brandon Clark, you introduce some of these two-way players and lower rotation guys, and the Grizzlies are well on their way to a nice quality rebuild here. I mean, you can't do much better. Just looking at all the pieces that they have to work with and who they're moving on from. You lose Marcus Saul, you lose Mike Conley. I mean, it's usually going to be hard for you to bounce back, but considering the circumstances, the Grizzlies are in great position, and their summer league has been fantastic. So I'm going to go into my first player here that I thought was a great standout in the summer league, and he is making waves, not just because he is on the Miami roster. I have two guys from the Miami roster, which seems a little bit biased, but I mean, just overall, if you go look at some of the leaders in the categories and some guys that are making waves and headlines, these two are definitely on the list. So Kendrick Nunn is my first standout player from Summer League because he is basically all that you could want from a point guard, at least at this level. He has great finishing ability. He's very strong. He's a sturdy 6'3", and his shot is actually pretty nice. So, I'm going back to my list here and looking at his averages. He was at about 21 points a game, 5 boards, and 6.3 assists. And if I remember correctly, he was third overall in Summer League assist per game average. So you add in the fact that he was 55% from the field, and he had 1.5 steals. And, Kendrick Nunn should be, I think, one of the front runners for, I think they have that all like Summer League Vegas team, if I'm not mistaken. So he would probably, I would think he would be one of the front runners for that award. So, I mean, this is a guy that came from the Santa Cruz Warriors G League affiliate, the Warriors G League affiliate last season, put up some great numbers. And the Heat actually brought him in on the last day of the season. So most people were looking at Dwayne Wade's last game that made all the headlines for good reason. But at the same time, nobody honestly even took a second look at this guy, at least the fans, me included. But he came in and the Heat locked up his rights for 2 years and $3.1 million. So the Miami has his rights actually through 21-22. So I think this is going to be a guy that's going to be a quality point guard, going to get some solid minutes this season as well as the next few seasons, because I think it's a no-brainer that you bring him back, you guarantee his deal. It becomes guaranteed on August 1st, and he should be around for a long time because that $150K is a no-brainer looking at what he's done in the Summer League.
For sure. And then in addition, this isn't the first Summer League we've seen Kendrick Nunn be a standout. Last Summer League, he was I don't know if he was quite dropping like 30 and 6, but he was definitely very impressive on that Warrior squad as well.
True that.
I think the toughest thing with some of our lists is figuring out who we want to put down as the Summer League MVP.
Oh, that is I think that's going to take a whole nother crop of time, man. It's pretty hard to do just looking at the names in front of us. But
yeah,
a lot of great places.
It's tough. I almost want to put one of the guys you have down your list as the MVP, but we'll get to him later. So, I know I have 4 other guys, but I will briefly mention one other person that is an honorable mention purely because he's on my team, the Mavericks, which is Antonius Cleveland. And he was collecting so many steals and just reading so many passing lanes. Like, he outperformed Josh Reeves, even though both of them were very impressive. And he was just much more refined as a shooter and as an overall offensive creator compared to Reeves. Like, he can create his own offense in transition. He had a couple of Euro step finishes in the lane, which were pretty impressive. And I was like, where did we see this from Antonius Cleveland 2 years ago? And then he hurts his knee, and all of a sudden he's risen to like a new level, and that's pretty impressive. But I don't want to waste too much time on a guy that's like 4 years into the NBA. So getting into the second player on my list, who is also a rookie, Jackson Hayes out of Texas, now playing for, of course, the New Orleans Pelicans. The most obvious thing with him was he was efficient. He was dominant in terms of his athletic showing. He put up so many ridiculous dunks and blocks that it was remarkable. And then in addition, it looked like he was much stronger than he was in college. It felt like he wasn't getting taken advantage of physically as much as he was in college, where it felt like even guys like Daniel Gafford could post him up and take advantage of his thinness. Mm-hmm. Also, the jump shot's kind of looking like it might be a thing sooner than we thought.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a shocker. I wasn't ready for it to be him shooting jumpers in game action in games that are close in summer league. I was thinking they were going to reserve it for blowouts, and I mean, here we are.
I mean, that guy is one of the most exciting prospects in the NBA because of the sheer athletic gifts, similar to what Mitchell Robinson brings to the table. Just crazy length, the height is there, and the athleticism. So you pair all that together, and this Pelicans roster, man. You add in Jackson Hayes. I kind of wish selfishly that he was with the Hawks roster. He was actually slated to go to Atlanta in a lot of mock drafts, but I mean, hey, him and Zion in the same team, I have no problems with that combination. I'm taking that 10 times out of 10, and he's going to be an ideal lob target for that team for a long time. Even though he's probably not going to start on day one, he's going to come in and be an energy player. He's going to wow the crowd. He's going to have people oohing and ahhing nonstop. And, Jackson Hayes has got the tools for sure. If he puts them together, like you kind of alluded to with his jump shot coming along faster than expected, he's going to be a fantastic player. So I look forward to seeing a lot more Jackson in the near future. So I'm going to finish off my little Miami Heat segment here with the second standout player, which is pretty obvious at this point. Tyler Hero is coming in as one of the top picks. He was one of the only lottery picks that we actually saw play, which is kind of disappointing. But what wasn't disappointing is some of the raw numbers he put up. I mean, he was just under 20 points a game. His efficiency waned a little bit. He was assuming more offensive responsibility than he was used to in the past. Coming from Kentucky, he wasn't used to running the point, running the show, running pick and rolls. He did a lot of that in summer league, and the Heat staff really wanted to see how good he was at initiating the action and being more than just a off-ball player. So the Heat staff really believes that in time he will become that guy that can play both positions in the backcourt, be a nice combo guard. And his size and basketball IQ should allow him to do that. I mean, this is a guy that, averaged, a pretty good amount of assists. I mean, he was up at 4.3 assists, which isn't bad considering he was slated as just a strict sharpshooter coming in. But, Tyler is one of those guys, he wasn't included in any kind of discussion of a Westbrook trade, which should tell you exactly how high the Heat staff thinks of his ability. So not to go on too long with, the Miami connection here. I don't know if you can see my shirt, but got a little Miami going on. But his shot creating is a little bit better than I expected. His defense wasn't bad. So all around, I was very impressed with Tyler. And I'm very happy to have him on board. He's kind of proved me wrong coming off of a lukewarm response during the NBA draft a little bit earlier.
Yeah, the thing with Hero for me was always he seemed like one of those candidates to have a big summer league. So right. I was kind of low on him starting the draft. I was like, but at the same time, I knew he's the type of guy, like the amount of shots he's willing to take whenever he's not restricted by a coach like John Calipari, and the range he has in his game is like it's perfect weapon.
He is fearless. I love it.
But at the same time, it's like the concerns I had are still evident, which is mostly on the defensive end, because my biggest worry is how is he going to be able to handle players that are quicker, stronger, and longer than him? And there's not too many of those at Summer League that are refined. Like there's like maybe 3 or 4 that are that refined in their perimeter players. And one of them was on the Grizzlies, but we are not going to talk about him because he's not a rookie and not like a second-year player. He's been in the league for forever now.
It does seem like,
but that would be Caboclo though.
Yep.
But anyway, so do you have anything else to say?
Oh no, not about him. I think I mean I probably could go on for a while, but I'll leave it at that. It's he's been talked about a lot already. So I'll hand the reins back to you for this next player.
All right, another Pelican, of course, because apparently all of them are amazing. Didi or Gigi, apparently in Portuguese it's pronounced Gigi. Gigi Louzada of the Pelicans. The most outstanding thing with him was he showed such a wide versatility in his game that we didn't really get to see in Brazil because he was in such a limited role. We saw him reading passing lanes, which we did see in Brazil, but the transition ability, he was always like attacking the basket in transition. He was creating more of his own offense on the perimeter, which in Brazil, mostly he was creating on straight line drives, but here he used a little bit more side to side in his game as well. The shooting was on point. His effort was that still that high motor that you would see in Brazil, like on every single game, it felt like. And then the range with him being able to stand out to the 3-point line consistently as keeps proving people that, like, hey, just because he's from like this one foreign league that like is kind of, well, it's not, I wouldn't say not great competition, but more like underappreciated, because Brazil has a pretty high birth of talent, but just no one is. It's kind of hard to access because of recent history with some players, as well as just it's hard to find film on it because it's one of those rare leagues in South America. But
good point.
Now he's going to head over to Australia, and all these teams are going to see him play up close against LaMelo Ball, RJ Hampton, Terry Armstrong, and then among others in the NBL itself, and then also some other college players coming back over. So I'm really excited to see what he does in Australia this year. But pulling up the stats for Luzada, because I've kind of run over his game at this point. 44% on the field, which was, I'm pretty sure, like at least half, if not more, 3-pointers, right?
Probably. I would assume so.
Yeah. And then in addition, 3 boards, 2 assists, 1.5 steals, and half a block for a guy that's 6'7". It's a pretty solid outing, if you ask me.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's funny that you mentioned, he's gonna be playing in Australia most likely. You're pretty high on these Australia prospects. You talk about them pretty frequently. So, it's to be expected that you had somebody that would be ended up going to Australia over here. I know you cover that a lot, so not surprised at all to hear that. But I'll go to number 3 here. We'll take a break from Miami here for just a little bit. We'll get into Brandon Clark and look at the summer league he's had, which I guess in some ways is surprising, but also not very surprising. I mean, this is a guy that, he wasn't a one and done prospect. He's not super raw. It was actually, it's funny that how NBA prospects have evolved over the years. Before, you wanted those players that were established and have a history of 3 and 4 years of college. Now, today, you want the one and dones. You want the guys that have like a seemingly unlimited ceiling. You want guys that have a lot more growing to do because, you have all the hope in the world. You don't know what they could be. So it's like, for all you know, they could be the next LeBron James or Giannis or KD. So the hype is out of this world. But with Brandon Clark falling as low in the draft as he did, it's pretty incredible that he went 21st. Great pickup for Memphis Grizzlies, going along with Jaren Jackson. I talked a little bit about him on my draft podcast, but Brandon Clark brought a wealth of tools to the table. His stats didn't leap off the page. I mean, 12.5 points, 7.3 boards, 1.8 blocks did jump out to me. I'm pretty good efficiency at 54% from the field. But, Brandon Clark is one of those guys. He has the tools, but he also has the refinement to go with those tools. So he's not super raw like Jackson Hayes or Mitchell Robinson. He's refined. He's matured. He's more sure of himself. He's 22. By the time the season starts, he's going to be close to 23 years old. So this is a guy that's not done growing. Of course, he still has more to go. He's still a young player, but he's not, as he doesn't have as much upside, I guess, as some of the other players, which is fine. I mean, Jaren Jackson, if you want upside, Jaren Jackson has all the upside in the world that you can want. But for Brandon, his awesome intelligence and, help side defense is excellent. He's a great rebounder. He's tough, and he plays bigger than his size. So you put all that together, and Memphis is looking at another fantastic player to go in the front court. And he still has some time to grow into his role. He's probably not going to be a starter. I think Jaren Jackson and Valanciunas are going to hold it down. But in time, I would assume he'd be the starter going long term. And at that point, him and Jaren Jackson are going to be an absolute force to deal with on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, like the weirdest thing with Brandon Clark is he feels like he started a new development curve since he started at Gonzaga. Like he's a completely different player now. Like he basically was a center, like a completely only center / like sort of power forward for San Jose State. Takes the gap year when he transfers. And now all of a sudden he's like the best shot blocker in the entire NCAA, despite being like only 210 pounds and like having a neutral wingspan, and like he's blocking shots against teams like Tennessee and Florida State and Duke and Arizona, and you're like, and then in the tournament, and it's like, so the defense clearly translates to against higher level athletes, so that's not the issue. And then in addition, you see he has the playmaking ability, and on top of that, suddenly you see him shooting threes, and he's actually making them, and you're like, wait, this is going to be a thing now?
Yeah.
So
what else is he have in the bag?
Yeah, it's like I think his ceiling is truly underappreciated, and I think he might be growing on this sort of like somehow discovered curve that like few prospects are able to find, where they can grow later into their careers, whereas most have to start earlier, or else it might be too late.
Yeah, I think that's something else, Max, that we kind of we forget about in the NBA. You know, we're thinking that guys are going to grow like this, and just look at a guy like Jason Tatum. You know, the growth curve doesn't go like this. You know, sometimes it's going to be up and maybe a little bit down and up again. So it's not linear. And some guys, I mean, most guys honestly don't hit their peak until, you know, what do we see, 27, 28. So you have to give these guys time to see all the defensive coverages around the league and really grow into their bodies and see what it's all about. So, you know, for Brandon, I mean, absolutely, his ceiling is pretty crazy. And we kind of get down on players that don't have crazy wingspans and don't, you know, have some, they're not 7 feet or whatever. But with Brandon, it doesn't matter because he's just that smart. He knows how to play the game. So he's going to have no problems, you know, continually getting acclimated to this NBA game. So, you know, we're gushing about Brandon and taking a lot of time on him, which is justified. But we can, you know, go ahead and continue the list here, man. So with Brandon down, who's the next guy on your list that is that made waves in Vegas?
Well, here's another old college senior for you, Terrence Mann.
Terrence Mann. So
out of Florida. Sorry, you were going to ask.
Educate our listeners here a little bit about him, our viewers. I mean, me, myself, I'm not terribly familiar with him. So give us the lowdown of what this guy brings to the table.
I would say, in short, the most exciting thing about him is his high motor crashing the glass. It reminds me of Dorian Finney-Smith on the Mavericks, except he's far more athletic. And I think that's really underappreciated. And then in addition, this year his shot really came along for the first time. The problem for scouts was always he was a little too passive shooting it this year, because it was the first year he really knew how to shoot a basketball like properly and performed well with it. So it was tough for scouts to really get behind his shot development, but it's turned out pretty well for him in Vegas this summer. And he got picked, I think, 48th in the draft. So he was considered one of the top prospects in the draft if he's going to get picked. So it's certainly, he had the track record. I just feel like some people kind of forgot about him because he played on Florida State, one of those teams that just has a lot of really good players, and it's kind of hard sometimes to remember who stands out.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many players here, and Summer League is the perfect evidence of just how many players warrant a roster spot in this league or in consideration for a roster spot. It's not easy to make it. And with all these names, I mean, just like Terrence Mann here, you know, he's not one of the guys I'm familiar with just because there are so many prospects here. But that's the great thing about the league. Everywhere you look, every franchise has at least a couple of those guys that are making their way up the depth chart and making a name for themselves. So I won't go too much into depth about him just because I'm not quite familiar with what all he brings to the table, but I feel like you provided a good synopsis of what we can expect from him. So I'll go into number 4 here. This is a player that has some connections to a player that is already in the league. He's actually a relative of that player. So Nickeil Alexander-Walker, relative cousin specifically of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is one of my favorite players to watch right now. His tools are insane. And not surprisingly, Nickeil has some of the same traits that make SGA so good. So for Nickeil, I got to watch him, you know, pretty thoroughly while I was at Summer League. And then also just a couple of days ago, he played against Miami in the Summer League quarterfinals, I believe. And, you know, he had a fantastic game. He went off for 30 points, I believe. And he's one of those guys that's not just going to be a scorer, distributor. He's going to do everything. So at 6'5", 205 pounds, I'll just go. I'll call him NAW for now. I'll use those three because his name is pretty imposing here. But NAW, man, he has all the tools. He has all the tools to be a great combo guard, just like SGA. 27.7 points per game, 4 boards, 6.3 assists, 2.7 steals as well. So against the Heat, he had 34 points. He was only 9 of 21 shooting, but he made almost all his free throws, and he was 5 of 12 from three-point range. So he actually dropped 16 points in the fourth quarter alone of that game. So at that moment, I kind of realized how good he is. And like we said before, how great of a squad the Pelicans have on their hands. And this is just summer league. We know that their roster, not even including Zion, is already very established. So across the board, the Pelicans have an embarrassment of riches. And, Alexander Walker is just another example of that. Just because he's such a smart player, he understands how to pick his spots already. He has great size and great versatility at that position at his size. So looking forward for more from him. And if he's anything like SGA, he continues growing like SGA has in just 1 year. He's going to be one of the standout players for the Pelicans, and he's already in consideration to get pretty steady minutes, as talented as New Orleans is already.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, in addition to all those young players New Orleans has, they also have some key veterans in Holiday, Favors, and Redick, all on the same team. And then they have they have a wealth of draft picks from the Anthony Davis trade to look forward to in the future. Which, I mean, some of those are like 5 years down the line. I'm like, do they even have time to wait 5 years for those draft picks? Like, I'm not even sure, because they have so many young players on the team. Like, where would they fit them into their roster?
Right. You got to remember, the roster's going to be different, in 5 years. Holiday and Redick will probably be gone. Favors, but still, yeah. That's a lot of young players to integrate, but that's a great problem to have. And you can even just flip those picks for another established player down the line. So the Pelicans, they're pretty stacked right now in summer league and in the regular season. They're one of the most exciting teams to watch and follow.
Yeah, no doubt. So I think we've gushed about as much as we can about the Pelicans.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to bring up one of the best players and one of the best teams from Summer League, who unfortunately lost in the first round because Brandon Clark is an absolute beast. And that would be the Boston Celtics' own Grant Williams out of Tennessee. The Catan man himself.
Catan man. I love it.
The interesting thing with Grant Williams is there's this running joke about him being like he coaches the team for Summer League.
Oh, players coach?
Because like he's such a high IQ. He has such a high IQ and feel for the game that like he could actually coach the team as a player. And he actually really did show out as being really intelligent on the court. And he was also surprisingly showing out some of his three-point shot, which was, I remember how many people bashed him for not having a three-pointer in college. And then he looks like it's really kind of advanced this summer league as well. So, and then his ability to make a defensive impact despite being like he's listed 6'7". He could be 6'5". Who knows? And he's still, yeah, he's still making such a serious impact. And then in addition to that, he's shooting, like with the jump shot, he's at 37% from three. It's like he's never shot that well from that range ever in his whole career. He didn't even have a jump shot coming into Tennessee.
And time to now.
This is why you bet on smart basketball players, because there are three reasons. Number one, they're going to make an impact on the court even whenever they can't put up stats. Number two, they're going to realize what areas they need to improve. And number three, they're going to do whatever they can to fit into the system because they know that's what's going to produce wins. And Grant Williams did all three of those things.
Absolute facts, man. When I was going into my draft analysis and going to my podcast leading up to the draft, I kept hearing about how people gushed about Grant Williams, and I didn't understand why. I knew a little bit about him. I knew he was one of those tough, gritty players, understands the game, all the usual traits that go into a player that's has multiple years of college experience, but I didn't understand just how good he can be until Summer League. I got to see him firsthand, and see how he plays a part in so many things that the Celtics did in summer league, and it all kind of made sense to me. So now I saw why some people had him, in their draft rankings, like probably top 15, and one of those, players that is going to end up being drafted lower than he should have. Because why? We want upside. We want the youngest players possible. So just because Grant isn't one of those trendy players, he gets, he caught a little bit of flack and dropped a little bit lower, but that worked out for the Celtics, picked themselves up a very nice player, and across the board, Grant he's gonna have a long career. He may not be an all-star, he may not be a superstar, but he's gonna be in this league a long time. So very good player. I'm glad that you pointed him out for the listeners here. So let's get into our last couple players here. So my fifth player that I thought made a very positive impact, and I saw him from the third row in Vegas, was Lonnie Walker, the fourth. Lonnie Walker had a very problematic. I see you over there, man. I think you're pretty excited about this one. But Lonnie Walker is, he had a very problematic rookie season. He was hurt constantly. He spent a lot of time in the G League, and he was just waiting his turn. Summer League came around, and I can see that on his face. This is one of the great positives of being there live, which I can't wait to get into here in a minute. But I could see the look on his face. Every time he scored, he was smiling. He was running back down the other side of the court. He was having a lot of fun. He understood, and in the second year, he had such a leg up on a lot of these guys. He's like, you can't stop me. You can't stop me. I'm dropping 30. That's exactly what he did. I'll go back to his averages here real quick. This is only 2 games, so we got to keep sample size in mind. But 30 points per game in 2 games. The other stats weren't great. 4 boards, 1.5 assists, whatever. But 58% shooting. The mid-range is on point. The three-pointer was on point. He was knocking down a series of mid-range shots. He was in the open court because this guy's athletic. He can run the floor, and he can fill the lanes quickly. So all that together, I mean, he got up. I think he had a couple alley-oops. He was just having so much fun out there. He was loose. He understood what he needed to do. He went out there and executed. No questions asked. So Pop has another young front court player along with Murray, along with Derek White, who was actually a standout last year. So the Spurs are on a roll with these summer league guards, clearly. But, Lonnie is going to have a great season, I think. I don't know where his minutes are going to be because Brian Forbes is still on board. DeRozan is still there. So minutes are going to be at a premium. But nevertheless, Lonnie has got a stronger career coming. His shot is much improved. His percentages last year were rough, mainly because he was hurt. But overall, the Spurs have another great prospect on their hands. So, again, embarrassment of riches for the Spurs, at least in the backcourt, because they're such excellent draftees or drafters, and they know what to look for in prospects.
Yeah, I mean, the Spurs always seem to land at least one person that like people are consistently low on, and yet somehow they turn him into something way more than people could have ever expected. And Lonnie Walker looks like he's going to be far ahead of where we thought he was. And I think the interesting thing with him is he's like, what, 6'4" with a 6'10" wingspan, athletic, strong enough. You might be able to play him out on the wing in your bench rotation. And with the Spurs, I mean, they don't really have a whole lot of wings left on their roster, especially because Marcus Morris spurned them for the Knicks. You have Rudy Gay. You have Rudy Gay. You have Lonnie Walker. You have you have Keldon Johnson. And
I forgot about Keldon. He was nice too.
Keldon statistically was not nice, but he definitely still showed he showed his effort on the court, which was something in itself. I think it's going to be tougher for him to transition to the system because Kentucky is just one of those really weird colleges that have this really weird style of play that it can be hard for NBA players to adjust, especially when you're coming into a system like the Spurs that is very complex and completely different from a college system like Kentucky. So while Keldon may take a little while to adjust, I think once he adjusts, he's going to be ready and raring to go to make a serious impact for that team, especially because he's the right kind of guy for that culture.
Big time. Let's finish this off, man. Who's your last player? Who you got?
I think I already ran through all 5.
Oh, you did have all 5. That's right. Okay.
I did run through all 5, but because we're talking about some of these second and third year guys, we're talking about I'll give a brief mention to a 5th year guy just for the fun of it. Campaign, man. Campaign
autographed.
averaged like
Yes.
3 steals a game in summer league.
Nuts.
Put up like
Crazy.
20 points, and on top of that was just all over the court. And it's rare that you see a guard make such a serious level of impact outside of scoring.
Right.
And it's also kind of weird to watch because you're in your 5th year and you're still here. But hey, he played so well that he earned himself a contract. So shouts out to him, right? I mean,
that's perseverance, man. You can't always make it in your first and second try, but if you stick at it, don't give up, then hey, you deserve everything coming your way.
Indeed.
So Campaign, shout out to Campaign. One of the 2 autographs I got at Summer League. Fantastic guy, and wish him all the best in his career. That heat check that he had, again, I forget the opponent, but the heat check that we saw, he had about 3 threes in a row.
Kings.
In like under a minute, the Kings was fantastic to see. So he's got that ability. He can definitely light it up.
And further, just briefly want to mention, here is his net rating from the Las Vegas Summer League this year.
Boy.
29.
29. That's all that needs to be said. There you go. Contract. Yeah, I can see why.
70% true shooting.
That is scorching the nets, my friend. That is very impressive. But shouts to Campaign. We stand Campaign after that great showing that he had in Summer League that we saw with our own eyes. So that's all great. We love the players. We love to see the action. But let's get into some of the other nitty-gritty details. I've kind of covered this a little bit in a YouTube video I put out yesterday. But Summer League is such a great experience because of the people you can meet. I mean, you're a prime example, Max. We have some common friends. We have some ties, but we didn't know each other directly until Summer League. It's just a great evidence on how it could bring people together from all over the country, all over the world. Scouts are there, front office staff are there, players, coaches, anybody you can ever dream to meet, media members, broadcast people. So I wanted to run down some of the great experiences of Summer League, maybe a little bit off the court, that are just fantastic, that really stuck out to me. And just a few reasons why I would say for maybe people that are considering going to Summer League that have never been before, to absolutely give this a shot because it's well worth it. So for me, my personal experience, I went through a third-party network to get all my tickets, flew out on Spirit. I got in Friday the 5th in the afternoon, just in time to see Miami play. I stayed 4 days and 3 nights, got a nice place in downtown Vegas. One of the first things that stood out to me coming from the Southeast is I'm not used to dry heat. I'm used to humidity and very tropical heat. It's a lot different. So getting out there and seeing how even the weather's a little bit different is, it's also kind of like a little bit of a shock as well. But going into Summer League directly, walking in, they have a ton of activations going, photo booths are going, the Papa Shot is going, the 2K, the whole experience is pretty surreal. And that's even before you get into it's like some of the other details, like, you're meeting players and you're meeting these people. And when you're standing side by side with some of your like childhood heroes, like I know for you've been a Mavericks fan for a long time, and you're sitting in the same room, you're watching these guys, they're on the sidelines, like, oh, Rick Carlisle is over just across the way there. And, Dwight Powell is, right down there in the first row. We're standing right, just across from him with his new contract. Shouts to him as well. It's a different experience, man. So what has stood out to you, man? Do you have anything in particular that stood out to you? I don't know if this is your first time or not, but what would you say to people that are considering going out to Summer League, possibly for the first time?
Well, first off, advisory about buying tickets. So if you are going to buy your tickets through the official website, don't be the person that tries to buy it at night and then realizes that you can't buy mobile delivery. There is a specific time frame that apparently you must buy your tickets from the main seller if you want to get it on your phone and not have to pay for mail, which is very dumb, but it is what it is. And I'm just trying to save y'all $10 right here. So make sure you order between, I believe it is 10:30 and 3:45 Pacific time. when you order your tickets. So that way you can get the tickets on your phone, so you only pay a $250 fee instead of a $12.50 fee for mail, or pay $5 for will call. And then you have to go go get your tickets and then go up. So then you're waiting in 2 lines instead of 1 to get into the arena. But in terms of my actual experience, I was fortunate enough to be able to stay with my grandparents. So I didn't have to worry about like a hotel and like even like food, honestly. But the one thing that really was like I had to go take the bus, so it took a little extra time to get there, which is fine. One advisory about the bus, if just for y'all that ever need to take it, the bus stop to get off at if you're heading from the outside of the strip, which you probably are, is on the 201 it's right at believe it's the street before Swenson, because there's no stop at Swenson on the way towards Thomas and Mack. But going on to the actual experience, I think the biggest thing I learned was I need to coordinate my summer league better because it really felt like I got to meet a lot of great people. But number one, I straight up forgot about one person. That person forgot about me, that we were going to plan something. So I ended up having to call him after he left Vegas on his drive home. At least I got to talk to him. Second of all, it was just hard to find certain people because I didn't know them, but we were trying to hook something up. And then third of all, what was most interesting was like trying to meet up with people that you've never met, but you've interacted with on Twitter before, or in your case, we just happened to meet. Like we had never, as far as I know, we've never talked on Twitter before.
Nope.
Yeah, no. What ended up happening was I was meeting up with Jacob Goldstein because none of my people were showing up until the evening, and then you came up and wanted to meet up with Jacob Goldstein too, which, I mean, dude's a freaking genius with all the stats he's invented and that are actually legitimate. And I mean, that was a pretty remarkable experience. And then meeting up with you, and now we are on this podcast together. It just shows you what Summer League can really do and why that's important. But it is important that if you want to meet people at Summer League in the future, that you or anybody else or me plans it out like at least a month in advance if you can. I tried to plan it in advance, but it was just hard for me to get a hold of people, and I didn't want to end up contacting people like every single day trying to get them to tell me what their plans were.
Yeah.
But I could have done better than I did, I still feel like. In addition to that, another surreal feeling is like, this is the first time I've ever sat this close to like professional basketball. Like I've never been that close. Like I've never been able to hear the coaches speaking on the sideline and hear what they're actually saying instead of just being like, oh, hey, like you don't even know what they're saying.
Right. It's completely different, man. Like that's one of the things that stood out to me. Not just the players, like, they're walking by and you're trying to get an autograph. It's like, that's one thing. But when the action is going on, when you're walking into like Cox Pavilion, I think is like, it's my preferred destination because it's even more compact and small. So you're even closer to the action kind of by default. But you go in there and like you said, like the coaches, you can hear everything they're saying. You're right there to the action. You can almost, get hit by a ball if a errant pass flies in your direction. It's pretty wild. I wouldn't want to get hit, but hey, if it goes in my direction, a little bit of screen time for me. But just being there so close to the action is wild. It's as close as I've been as well. Second row, third row. Money is can be a problem. So getting that close, having the opportunity to do that for $35, which I said this on my prior podcast, but I really doubt it will be $35 at least for the next. I would say $35 is not going to stick around forever. So if there are people that wanted to go, take advantage while it's there, because I think as the demand rises, they're going to start to believe, and I think this is true, that they can get away with lower or upping the prices for Summer League. So I would jump on it while you can, because if you could sit in the second or third row for $35, I'm sure people would still do that for $45, $50. So just something to keep in mind. And probably one last point that I would have on this is what I would do differently. Probably some of the same points that you had, Max, coordinating a little bit farther out. I tried to do it maybe a week or two before. It was kind of hard. Maybe even the day of with some people, and it's very difficult because you don't realize everything that's happening until you're there. It all hits you at once, and then you're trying to kind of get things in the right direction in the right order, and you can get kind of confused and you can lose track of stuff easily. So I would say to be on point with coordinating, games you want to go to, people you want to see far enough in advance so you won't get confused or forget about people. And it was all just kind of like a confirmation of my passion, want to work for a team. And I got to see what it's like behind the scenes in a sense, and being up close and personal to coaches and the staff. You really understand the work they put into it. I was there for 10 hours a couple of the days, and people were there before I got there and after I left. So I saw exactly what the kind of commitment it takes to be successful on that level. So those are probably the things that stood out to me the most and what I got out of my experience. So did you have any closing thoughts on Summer League in general and what maybe you're looking forward to for the coming years?
Yeah, so I did want to mention, I was going to add on to what you were saying about all the things going on. One of the things I didn't realize going on, they have some of these conferences and expos going on at Summer League that are like kind of hidden behind the games, but like aren't necessarily, you're not allowed to go, like you can still go in. They had this like player health conference at the Mendenhall Center, which is where like I guess the volleyball team plays. And I didn't even know what was going on until I walked out because I was leaving and I had to catch the bus. I was like, damn it, I probably should have been there for that because that probably would have been really interesting.
I bet.
And I wish some of this information was accessible. It feels like sometimes they kind of hide this information, partially because it's kind of hard to just post everything whenever like most of the people that are on there probably don't care about that. And then in addition, I was going to say briefly for the people buying tickets, make sure if you buy it from a third-party seller, that's a third-party seller you can trust. And that if also understand it's not actually $35 because you have to pay fees. It's really like $50.
That's a good
like
point.
$50, $55. And if I were you, I'd bring your own food if you can. Because they charge $6 for a bratwurst, $5 for a hot dog,
$4 for a drink,
$4 for a medium drink.
Yeah,
$5 for a large.
Insanity.
It's NBA pricing, so I wouldn't bother buying anything there unless you absolutely have to, which I did twice. And then other than that, I think I summed it up pretty well in terms of future summer leagues. What I'm looking forward to more, number one, getting to go to some of these conferences like Pro Scout School. What's the one? Sports Business Classroom. Those are the two top ones I can think of off the top of my head that are going on Summer League. But both of those are really important to getting to meet people, and I'm actually going to be able to go next year, and I plan on going. So I'm really looking forward to that because that you're guaranteed to get not one-on-ones, but like conversations with actual people working in and around basketball all over the world because they're all coming in here because Vegas for a week is the center of the basketball world. But I will add really quickly that I think it would be interesting is seeing how many people from the women's game are going to be at those sorts of conferences because I feel like the women's game is so inaccessible from the NBA side. I know so few people that work inside the NBA that know people inside the W. It kind of feels like they're in separate worlds, and I think we need to change that. I think we need to bring them together and relate them directly. And I think that would provide more opportunities to some of us who are currently like, well, it's kind of hard to break into the NBA. It's like, well, there's this other league that's top level basketball and it's taken very seriously. And I think we need to consider those options as well. And that way you don't have to go travel to some far-flung place just in order to try to work for basketball. You can keep your options open, try to keep your options at home. But that's pretty much everything.
Those are great points, man. And I really hope that you guys will kind of take this to heart, what Max is saying, and some of the little tidbits that I have. This is just a very short summary. I have a lot more points that I've made in my YouTube video over on my channel if you want to go head over there and check that out. And then also I'm going to make a blog post about this in written form over on my website. So I think that's going to about do it for us. This is Max's first go around on my podcast. I'm sure this won't be the last. So really appreciate you, man, jumping on here for a few minutes and just talking about our summer league experience in general, because it was life-changing for me and eye-opening. And I hope that the two of us together were a good resource for people that wanted a little summary of some of the best players and some of the big, like, good talking points or good takeaways from the summer league. So hope to have you on again in the future, and want to give you just like a few seconds to go through maybe something you're working on, maybe shout out your social media, just so the listeners and viewers know where to find you.
You can find me on Twitter at Max Scouts. And then also I have work on lockdraft.com. The only thing with that is a lot of it didn't get published because the site was sort of on hiatus, but we're bringing it back next season, and it's going to be in full force. Also, you can find my podcast, Third Round Picks, on wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Google, Spotify, the whole shebang. And then also I have some pieces about the Mavericks on the Dallas Prospect. I'm going to write some more this summer as well. I might even write a piece about the Wings, even though sometimes it's kind of hard to keep up with them because I end up trying to watch the games when I'm on vacation with family, and then like I kind of can't. But I'm going to try to keep up with them because I really want to try to stay committed to the W, because the W is really important, and it opens up so many more opportunities if we can make that league more important.
Absolutely, man. Couldn't agree more. So that's going to about do us for us, guys. Thanks again for taking the time to either watch the video or listen to the podcast. It's greatly appreciated. If you enjoyed it, maybe give us a following, subscribe. You can check us out on social media at BC Basketball 2. And then we'll also have our website, bcbasketball.info. You can find our blog posts and all the podcasts in one place. So until next time, guys, thanks for listening, and we'll be coming at you again with more basketball analysis real soon.